Welcome back to the Shock Absorber podcast. It is lovely to have you along with us, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you are listening to us in your ears via your favourite podcast app. I have two irregular co-hosts with me today. Are you irregular people?
Irregular.
Okay. Jai.
Hello.
Planning pastor at Soul Revival Church. Welcome.
That's me.
You haven't been on for a long time.
No.
It's good.
We're doing well.
It's good to have you along.
Thank you.
And Brayden, student minister or student pastor.
Yeah, arts pastor,
Arts pastor as well, of course.
Pastor of everything.
Yes.
Pastor of arts.
I don't think I've ever been on Shock Absorber.
You
Oh
have
no, I've been a talking. I was a talking voice
behind the
one
scenes.
Of the,
behind
one
the
of
camera.
the music.
About David Bowie.
David Bowie. Yes.
You were-
You were David Bowie.
Yes. Yes.
So welcome aboard,
Piggy Stardust. To quote the
you
latest
say
Ted Lasso.
Piggy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Don't worry.
someone said Piggy Stardust instead of Ziggy.
He's dressed as Piggy Stardust. That's
Oh,
all. That's
okay,
one
cool.
story.
Well,
No spoilers.
No
Yeah.
spoilers.
well, this is funny because we usually bring up a cultural artifact of some kind, and we're going to bring up one today that Jai and I have seen, but you haven't seen.
Yes.
But then you just brought up Ted Lasso, and you two watch Ted Lasso, but I don't watch Ted Lasso.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
we're going with my
Got to
one.
get into it.
Yeah. Let's start off today. We recently, Jai and I, saw, and along with a number of other people, the Jesus Revolution movie.
Mm.
What did you think?
I thought it was really good.
Mm.
I think it wasn't cringeworthy, which sometimes they can be. And I, from what I understand, there was a lot of emotion in the cinema. There was a few tears.
Mm.
A few times I reckon I teared up as well. It was very, very powerful portrayal of what had happened during that time. Was it late 70s?
Early 70s, I think.
70s,
Yep.
yeah, late
But
60s.
was few tears because I think the majority of the cinema were Christians, so they understood what was going on.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting not being a Christian, being in that cinema watching that movie.
Yeah.
It would have been very interesting.
And it was in a rather small cinema, but we well, not us, but a number of us and other people had sold it out. We'd bought every single seat in the house.
Yeah, it was
So
totally packed.
What was your favourite part of it?
I think there was a number of parts. I really appreciated the honesty. They didn't try to make the characters better than they are.
They didn't shy away from their failures and flaws as well.
Yeah, and I also appreciated too that the wives in particular had really powerful moments with the pastors in the movie, and I think too I think highlighting the tendency when there's success in church for anyone in ministry to think that they're the ones causing it, but that reminder that it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. Jesus is the one who brings the growth. Jesus is the one who does the ministry, and we just partner with him.
Yeah,
that shined through time and time again, which I was really encouraged by.
And I like that part of it was like, this is bigger than they, and it was both their wives of the two of the main characters were saying, this is bigger than you. Do you think God was going to do this? Like, God will do this however he wants, not how you think you're going to do it, and you just were partnering with Jesus rather than like doing it yourself. Yeah, I think that was a really good reminder, especially for all of us who are in some form of leadership at church. It's like you're actually not doing this on your own. Yeah, I think that was a good reminder.
Yeah, and it was obviously the story too about Greg Laurie as well, and just about how as a kid someone trusted him and had faith in the gifts that God had given him, and trusted him to go and lead a church, and that church is going gangbusters still today. So that was very encouraging as well.
And I suppose if you haven't seen it yet, we should say actually what it is. So it's a depiction of something that happened within the Jesus movement, which was a kind of a countercultural revolution where a ton of hippies, which is a part of the 60s and early 70s of the hippie movement, a ton of hippies became Christians. Yeah. And there was actually, it's like a Christian hippie movement, but it also became part of well-established churches. And this is what a main part of the story is how they actually came to become part of the church. Yeah. I can't remember, Chuck was the pastor, Smith. Chuck Smith, and how the story was how he opened it up to allow some of his hippie friends to come in, and how that upset a lot of people, including complaints about the carpet.
Yeah.
which was kind of funny. I shouldn't spoil too much of the movie.
No. Yeah, spoiler alert. Probably too late for that, but anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Brayden, are you planning to see it?
I'm sure eventually. I was going to
like
go
you
on
just
Monday
said it.
night, but I had something else on. So.
Oh, that's okay. You're like, I'll wait until it goes on streaming.
Oh, there was discussions about maybe going again as part of late night, maybe renting a cinema, going to see it again, or I'm sure it'll come out streaming something at some point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I suppose on the final point was it was cool to see. It's well known, obviously, that we are very much soul revivalists, and we love the way that we do ministry. And there was a lot of parallels with the things that we saw in the Jesus Revolution movie to how I'd experienced ministry. Jai, for example, you were my leader. I've experienced you doing what was actually happening in the movie by actually preaching in the open air or preaching at a youth group and things like that. So that was a really fun thing for me to see. And I think the Jesus movement has had a really large impact on how we do ministry.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Which was fun to see, and I think once Stu's able to come on again, we'll get his reaction on it, because he enjoyed it very much and he's studied that movement a lot. So it was cool.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun. So the reason we have both of you guys on is because really we wanted to give people a bit of a peek behind the curtain, because we're actually been doing our jobs rather than me just nattering on a podcast.
As opposed to not normally.
Yeah, that's right. But we've got these two brown pieces of paper with lots of scribbles on it. You might be able to hear it in the microphones or not. But do you guys want to say, like, we talked a few weeks ago about there being not ministry problems, actual gospel opportunities. So I think that's where I'd like to frame this, is what we're talking about today, is that this is a gospel opportunity that we've been working on today.
Yep.
And as I said, it's a bit of a peek behind the curtain of what we're actually doing here at Soul Revival. We were looking at in particular in one of our gatherings of how we could hopefully grow it in terms of our double up strategy for 2030. It's a goal that we've set for ourselves, is a double up, not just in people. That's a clear distinction we need to make, is not just a double up in people, but double up in our discipleship, our mission, and our resources. So that's also the frame of what we're looking at. This is that how do we help one of our gatherings to do this? Can I get your first reactions about how you felt when we were starting to do this, guys?
Well, I think Jai's already mentioned, and I think you've touched on it already, Joel, as well, is this discussion came out of the framework of that we don't actually grow the church. Jesus grows the church. We're partnering with him to do that. When we're talking about our double up strategy, that's not just saying, hey, we're doubling up our numbers. We're trying to get as many people involved. Of course, we want lots of people to come and know Jesus and grow in that way, but it's all coming out of the fact that if Jesus as a result of us partnering with Jesus, that Soul Revival grows over the next 10 years, how can we be ready and take advantage of that
and equipping our church
systems
and equipping our church to do it?
Yeah, so that's where we're coming from. We're not just
this is how you grow a church.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not we're not talking like a church growth model.
Yes,
we're talking partnership. How do we partner with Jesus? How do we, as a church, set ourselves up to partner with Jesus?
Yeah, and set ourselves to love the people that might come through the doors over that next period.
Yeah,
and that's something we're working through also with the 2030 goal of double up. That if we do have the headline of that is double up, and some of the resistance that has come to us through church is like, oh, you just want to double up people, we're not ready for that. And that's where I think that discussion came from too, Brayden, as you're saying, is that, well, if we are partnering Jesus, then we can be ready for that. It's his church. He's going to grow it how he wants, and then we just need to partner with him in readiness. He's going to raise up the people that we need. He's going to raise the resources. He's going to help us disciple and mission, as long as we are relying on what he's doing, rather than we're doing it out of our own strength again. Something we were just talking about the Jesus Revolution movie as well, is that we're going to do this partnering with Jesus first. If we don't double up, that's okay, because it's Jesus' church and that's what we're doing. But let's be ready for it, because that's the idea. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point to start with, Brayden, because I think we could go the other way and go, well, if we just do all these things, then God
Yeah.
will definitely bless us. No, let's flip it around and let's let God lead us in how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
What were your, I asked Brayden answered the question, what were your first reactions? Were you thinking the same thing, Joy, or were you thinking something different? Or you are our planting pastor in charge of 2 of our church plants that we've started since you've started working for the church. What was your initial reactions about what you wanted to do? And what was your position to begin with that I think as we can reveal as we go through this, discussing this, how did you feel like it was going to end up?
I think my initial response to this was I was very excited. And I think too that, as we've said 100%, it's all Jesus. And I think it's helpful for us to think through the framework of how we can partner with Jesus, because we need to be as well thought through with that as we can, but also be flexible enough to change as things change, which is the whole shock absorber idea. And I think too that, as Sorrow Bible Church, we're very conscious of making sure that all of our gatherings are unique, but are also similar. And so, we want anyone to go to any of our gatherings and for it to feel like a Sorrow Bible Church. Wherever it is, whatever size it is. And so the discussions we've been having today have been really interesting and helpful as we think through what does that look like, and what are some of the key elements that are common across all, what are some things that will change, what are, distinctives of certain sizes and those sorts of things. Really exciting to be thinking through some of these things. And again, as you said earlier, not seeing them as problems, but as gospel opportunities, which has also been a helpful mindset.
And I remember you saying to me that, what are the boundaries? Because I think you possibly felt that when we initially started Sorrow Bible Church, it was in Stu's lounge room. Then it went into where we were at President Avenue Community Church, where they were very gracious to allow us to meet there on a Saturday night. And then we moved to the factory where we actually are right now. But you were saying that when, in terms of planting the gatherings outside of where we are at Kirrawee, because we like to adopt a hub and spoke model, that Kirrawee is kind of the hub.
Yep.
And then we have our churches that are able to share resources and other things with the hub church that we have, but we're still planting outside of that church in order to reach more people.
Yep.
So I remember you saying that what are the things that can change and what are the things that can't change, so to ensure that we are like meeting within that particular area, especially the 2 gatherings that you are responsible for outside of Kirrawee, but also what are the things that are similar. I was wondering, when we put all this down, were you already thinking what we put down, or was there things you're like, oh, that's making me realise these are the things that we might be able to keep working on or to adapt in order to meet the goals that we're trying to meet for 2030?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think there were some things there that I'm like, I was already thinking those, and some that we dive deeper into and opened up stuff that I probably wasn't expecting, and that's been exciting, and a couple of things that have been helpful for us that I probably wasn't thinking about either, and so it's a mixture of all those things really, and I guess as the idea of the boundaries is just an idea of when you're doing something. I think I used this illustration before. You get told you've got a blank canvas. That's a wonderful thing to have. But if you don't know the size of the canvas, then you don't kind of know what you're going to be painting and what you're going to be putting on it, or how the scale of what you need to do, those sorts of things. So it's just defining what the size of the canvas is, or the boundaries, so to speak, so we can then work with what we've got and where we're at. And what we've been talking about is that canvas will get bigger, and so if under God. If so, the canvas will get bigger, and then so certain things will change and morph and become different as we go on.
And it's not necessarily all about growth as well. It's been about sustainability at different sizes.
Yeah.
So not just building something that's only sustainable when it's 100 people, but how do we make something that is is 15 people sustainable?
Yeah.
Always looking to grow, obviously, and
Yeah.
introduce more people to Jesus, but how can we be loving and discipling the 15 people while they're at that stage?
Totally. Yeah, and that's the thing is that, we've fallen into that category a little bit, but I know a lot of churches and church plants do is they try to pull off the big church model with a little church.
Mm.
And so, rethinking through those things not only are we thinking about, if we grow, but thinking about, well, how do we grow the people that we have already there, which is part of that double up, is that double up our discipleship. So we want those who are coming to grow in their discipleship, to grow in their maturity and their faithfulness and their trust and their love of Jesus, and to grow in their personal evangelism as they do that. And so if in the 10 years all we achieve of the 15 odd people that are there, that they double up in their discipleship, well, then that's a success. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's the goals that we have in terms of double up. Again, the headline is that sounds daunting, but when you start to think about it in those kind of terms, I think it seems a lot more real and a lot more realistic as well. Yeah. Because for one of our gatherings, for example, we think that it's probably doing quite well in that kind of mission category. Because we have those three categories: discipleship, mission, and resources. But we think that maybe it is lacking a little bit in discipleship. So what's the gospel opportunity there is, well, how do we foster more discipleship going on? How do we help our members that are part of that gathering are they reading their Bible daily? Are they praying daily? Are we working together as a team in order to build each other up and those kind of things?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also wanted to pick up something you said, Jai, just before, of some church plants trying to pull off the big church, and another scenario. And you did mention something interesting that, we'd like to say we should blow up some rockets.
Yep.
Using the analogy of SpaceX, Elon Musk's company that are launching rockets into space, which they recently had one that got really far, but then they blew it up, and they were all cheering. I don't know if you saw that.
I'd be cheering too if I blew a rocket up.
Yes.
I'm all for that.
Yeah. Well, the latest one, they got it into a certain place, and they had the initial burners break off, and then I think they went to go for the next one, and it just blew up into space.
Oh, right.
And then they showed the command center wherever they were doing. They were all just applauding and enjoying it. But what that means is really, in terms of an iterative approach, that taking some experiments. Stuart's also used the analogy of building a bridge to a new reality, because if you build a bridge across to a new place, then you can always come back to where you came from.
Yeah.
All of that said, you talked about almost plonking a church that in a new place that's the same as the old church, or the same size. But you also mentioned to me, and the reason I bring this up is because you said perhaps some of the gatherings who were trying to pull off Kirrawee in another location. Tell me about that realization and why you think that may have been a little bit misguided from us, and might have been a couple of rockets that we blew up.
Yeah. I think we've talked about how, a lot about our why and our how of what we do. And then when we get to the what, we often talk a bit that it's flexible and moving, but we probably haven't articulated exactly what that looks like fully. It's been a little bit ambiguous. And so I think, there are a few things that have changed. We've got instead of using a kitchen, we have a caravan, and we meet in off-site facilities instead of a permanent one, and little things like that we've just gone, well, okay, they're the differences. But we want to make sure that, as I said earlier, I think that we want all of our Soul Revival churches to look and feel like Soul Revival Church. And so I think we've fallen into the trap, and, I take some of that blame on that, that we have thought, well, to do that, we need to look and we need to do all the things that we do here on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning here. And so that, I guess, putting all that energy into trying to do that with a smaller church is not really doable or manageable, which is what we've been talking a bit about today, about how do we still keep that feel and that look without having to do all the things that are fully, I'm not going to say fully functional, but like a church of 100 plus can actually do when you're only 15, 20, 30 people. I
mean, a great example of that is, and I want to throw this to you because you're much better versed in it than I am, is the schools. Because we originally planned 2 gatherings in schools, but we've moved away from that now.
Yep.
Do you want to tell us why that was?
Yeah, a lot of schools, especially in New South Wales and in the area where we're at, decided that they, and rightly, stop against vandalism and all sorts of things, put up these massive, almost prison-like fences around all the schools.
Yeah, they do.
And so it's almost impossible to get into a school, which is good.
Unless you have a key.
Unless you have a key. But even then, you can only open a couple of doors. It's very blocked off, and it's to protect the kids, which is fantastic. But it also meant that doing church in school halls meant that it was very obstructed, and it was very hard to find the entrance. You didn't know what was going on, and the 2 schools that we were in anyway, the halls were actually quite a distance away from main roads. They were kind of tucked away, and it was really hard to see where we were. And even putting up banners and signs and all those sorts of things really was not enough for people to see what was going on. And so we realised just before COVID, just after COVID, I can't remember, that it might be worthwhile trialling somewhere else, which we did, which was much more prominent and open. And we realised that actually one of the best pieces of advertising is actually people seeing people.
Yep. It's like almost like a busy restaurant, At least you're probably going to get some decent food there.
Yeah, and so to actually see not just the sign, but actually the people gathering there actually made a huge impact on visibility, but also people just popping in and just seeing what was going on. That's happened with both of our gatherings that we had in schools. We've moved them out of schools, and while it was a great blessing while we were in those schools, we've seen fruit. It's probably a larger fruit from being a bit more open space.
Visible,
yeah.
That makes sense.
Prominent place.
Because with the schools, you've got, like you said, the big fence. So you got to get through a gate, and then walk a reasonable distance to anywhere at the hall or wherever you were holding the service in particular.
Yep.
And then we still had the caravan, for example,
Yep.
which is what we use at both these 2 gatherings.
Yep.
But even then, it doesn't make it entirely visible to people that are going by, which is in contrast to now. At both of them, they are much more visible. And even if you do have the caravan, that kind of fits in with what you're doing. And we're having meals outside. Is that correct? Most of the time?
In the morning, yeah, we are. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So that makes a lot of sense. Just at least have a bit of presence in the community. Brayden, I was going to ask you though, because you were scribing for most of this on these 2 lovely pieces of paper, artwork.
Which is why you can't read it.
Yeah, but you did write VBK as rather large letters. Do you want to explain that and why you wrote that?
I think it's just a way of that you've probably talked about it on the Shock Absorber before. Again, not a long-time listener, but first-time caller. I've listened to the first 3 seasons, I think.
That's right, more than some people. So.
Yeah. So Vespa, Beetle and Combi is how we categorise, I guess, smaller, medium and our larger gatherings. And it's just a way of, I think, hopefully recognising that there's different needs to these different sizes of congregations. Maybe obviously churches that are much bigger would need a lot more structures going on and things happening and legals and all that kind of stuff going on. Just recognising how we can best love these different sized gatherings by really thinking through these categories. And I guess that's what we were doing today, and mainly focusing on Vespa, which is the smallest category that we have, just thinking through how can we really effectively disciple, be on mission and resource a gathering that is the size of a Vespa, which I think is it like 15 to 30-ish?
Yeah, it's around that. I mean, we said we don't want to use numbers too much, but to give an idea of the gathering size, the Vespas are 15, 20, maybe up to 30.
Yeah.
And then we probably recategorize it as Beetle, which would be, I would say, 32.
Yeah, anywhere from 50-ish.
Yeah.
I reckon a little bit below, a little bit above, probably.
Yeah. And then a combi is probably around 100 plus. Yeah. So, and I mean, and to describe where we're probably at is that I would say that we probably have, how many combis do we have if we describe that as our church? We'd have 3.
Yep.
We have all the ones at Kirrawee.
Yeah, Friday, Saturday and Sunday morning.
Yep. And then Beatles would be our Cronulla gathering and ride.
Yep.
And one of the discussions is with the Yarra Warriors that we're part of the reason is we're trying to categorise where is that actually going to be, and then how does that inform what we actually do going forward in terms of those gospel opportunities. One thing that we did look at though in terms of defining if one of these gatherings does become a Vesper is what are the distinctives for that actual gathering. Can you help us run through that now? Like, what were the things that would because that's coming back to the discussion that you were saying before, Dry, is like, how is it still soul revival, but how is it appropriate for the context it's currently in, depending on its discipleship, its mission, its resources, where it is, its location, and all those kind of things. So tell us, what do you think? Why don't you tell us the things that you thought were definitely going to be there? And then we can go into more into detail on the things that we kind of came up with today.
I think we talked, and I thought these things would be there, but the sort of three common elements across all three of these, the Vesper, Beetle and Combi being, first one is what we do in the service. We pray and we confess our sins, we read the Bible and we hear the Bible explained. That's a given thing, that we're friends and that we share a meal together. Those three things are common across all three. The other thing with the Vesper is we talked about doing it more low key. So in terms of setup and even length of time, those things are it's less about setting up formally and more about engaging in formal relationships, informal relationships.
In informal
relationships. So it's really just creating space for us to be friends and to get to know each other better, to invest in each other's lives and to invite people into that, more than doing all the formal things that we would do normally in church. That's not saying we don't do, as I said, the praying and the reading and the sermons, those sorts of things, but actually giving enough time for relationships to grow and to cultivate.
And I think this is an interesting distinctive that we came up with, and it's not saying it's distinctive to other churches, but this is what we have been talking so far about probably in the last 4 episodes on the Shock Absorber is friendship. And Brayden, you continually said it's key to everything we do here at Soul Revival. Please elaborate, and why were you saying that?
I think we've had a few discussions really focusing in on the idea of friendship over the last couple of months as staff, and it's something I keep chatting with Heath and a few other people as well. It's really key to everything we do at Soul Revival. Like, it's actually really, really important. I think it's the thing that obviously we're not the only church that are friends with each other, and I'll make that distinction now, but it's something we really like to focus on because I guess the distinction we have between just trying to be friends or just trying to be friends down at the football club is that we can be friends with anyone because we've been reconciled through Jesus. We have that in common, and that's the most important thing. So you think about friendship in any other community, and it's built on the fact that you like the same football team, or that you like the same hobby, or that you're really into something. Well, we have that distinctive as Christians and as Soul Revival, where we can build our friendship on the most stable ground, which is Jesus, which is pretty amazing. And we think that's a massive advantage in what we're trying to do, in reaching out to people and competing with other things that are going on in their lives. But it's also something that just enriches your life in general. We talk about a lot about loving God and loving others. Like we can love because he first loved us. That's the foundation. As we said before we even started this conversation, we're partnering with Jesus in this. But then how does that look like? And how does that flow out? And I think friendship is what flows out of that, is that relationship we're able to have with others. And I think that's the distinctive with everything that we try and do in terms of practice at Soul Revival, is that we want to be a group of friends. We want to be a group of friends because we love Jesus and because he loves us. That's what we build our friendship on, and that's how we move forward as a team, because we've seen that really change people's lives.
Yeah, and as you said, we've been talking about it a lot as a staff team, especially in terms of rebuilding after COVID. We wanted to rebuild our ministry teams, which have suffered a little bit just because of the disconnection that COVID and COVID restrictions resulted in. We keep going back to John 15:15, which says, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you." Jai, can I get your perspective on being friends, as not just as leaders, because we're talking about in context of a staff team, but also just as you're coming to church?
Yeah, I think like when we talk about being friends, we're not talking about, well, we're going to be so close to each other that, you know, we want everybody to be our best man at our wedding, all that type of thing. But it's just that sharing of our lives with one another, and actually coming to church to hang out with friends, to catch up with each other, see how each other are going, pray for each other, encourage each other, spur each other on, just to do life together and to go on this journey of faith together. And when the chips are down and life's tough, you need your Christian friends around you to support you and encourage you to keep going. And so this idea of being friends is super important, not just in leadership, but in church life in general. And, you know, if we're excited about coming and hanging out with our friends at church, that makes church even more exciting, as it should be. And I think when we're looking to be friends with one another too, that we go and do stuff with our friends, and so we can go on mission, we can go and plant a church, we can go and do Bible study, we can do all these things together out of those friendship groups as we would with any friendship.
I think it enables us to live Christian lives in all of our life, rather than just when you turn up to church, or, oh, that person's a Christian at work, but like, what are you actually living it out in a way that actually shines the light of Jesus? I think that's something I've been thinking a lot about since Tim preached the sermon on salt and light, talking about how there's also almost a mandate from Jesus saying because you have the Holy Spirit, you can improve the lives of other people, whether they're Christians or not, and improve the world. Make the world a better place.
Yeah, and I think we've obviously been chatting about this in terms of very inward thing as we're looking at planning a gathering and discipleship and that focus. And I think that's absolutely true. That's the thing that enriches our community and really helps us focus on that. But as a 13-year-old walking into Guymer Anglican youth group for the first time, like well before I heard the gospel preached or was even interested in, years before I was interested in anything that was said in the talk, the thing that kept me hanging around and the thing that struck me most was the friendship that was on display between the youth group leaders and also between the youth and their leaders and the youth themselves. So I think that's something that is a really special part of the community that we can open up to other people.
Yeah, and to echo that, Jai spent a lot of time on me at youth group trying to be friends with me, and eventually we became friends.
Eventually wore you down.
Yeah, that's right.
Wore you down. But that's the thing too, I think, is that we often have ideas of what friendship is, and the idea of being friends with everybody at church, we might think, I have my friends over my place for dinner. So how do I have all my friends over, all these church people over for dinner? There's only so many nights of the week, and that's why we do meals after all our gatherings, so that we can actually sit around together as friends. And we don't have to have people back to us. You might have people back to us, that's fine. But there's a way that we can actually catch up with our friends every weekend, whether it's after church for a meal, or on a Sunday morning before church for breakfast. All those things, we created opportunities for us to express our friendship.
It's a great segue actually to one of the other things that we kind of named three main things, which is kind of the first one was there's always prayer, there's always Bible reading and a sermon. Number two, we're doing it as friends, and number three, we have meals. They're real distinctives across all our gatherings. So if we do know we're going to any sort of Bible gathering, that's pretty similar. So I wanted to ask you about meals, because that's what I was saying is a great segue. Maybe
do like meals.
You do like meals? That's I'm glad. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here very long if you weren't eating any kind of meals. Brayden, What do you think meals is an important thing to have across all of our gatherings? I should also say that what we're touching on here is a lot to do with our strategy. So our theology, which we say is Jesus changes everything, stays exactly the same across all of our gatherings. Yeah. Our strategy as well stays exactly the same, which is share the truth of love of Jesus to everyone everywhere. And I think these three things are all coming out of that strategy. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, another important thing that we've talked about. We talked about our Momentum in Ministry season that we did, was having a very clear strategy. And I think that quite a lot of churches miss the strategy part and go straight to the practice. Having said that, let's come back to meals, Brayden. What do you love about meals, or what do you think the reason is that we always do meals across all our gatherings?
I remember, so I went as part of, I'm at college, at the Bible college at the moment, as part of Moore College. You go on mission, and you go and visit another church for a week and partner with them and have a bunch of fun and do a bunch of different things. And I just remember I obviously came to faith through Guymer Anglican and Soul Revival, so I've been doing meals for a long time. And I went to visit a church on a Sunday, and it was great, and the talk was great, and it was really fun, and the music was great. It was a really good time to hang out. And then this was like a 10 a.m. service, and then we finished, and then we got our biscuits, and I was very sad.
Where's the food?
I was starving. I'm like, what is this? So I think there is that element where it's just hospitality. As Jai said, there's a big part of our culture, and lots of cultures are set around food, and I think Stu would talk a lot about learning from our Aboriginal friends and talking about meals in that way. And I think it's about hospitality and loving each other and having that time. I think there's lots of different things that come out of it, and on the surface it might just seem like, oh, it's just you're just eating together, but I think it's time. It's time spent people cooking, they're hanging out, chatting, having a great time, and growing as friends together as they're preparing the meal. There's the time we get to spend over the meal, chatting about whether it's before or after, chatting about the sermon, chatting about your lives, chatting about whatever rubbish you want to chat about. But again, it's just spending time together. And I think, as you've mentioned, Joel, it's that opportunity, Jai, as you mentioned, like your real friends you invite over for dinner. Well, we're all having dinner together because we are all real friends.
And I love that little bit you picked up on too, that it's a scaled up home cooked meal.
Yeah.
We very rarely go and buy something in or get it catered or anything, because I think that misses a little bit of the point, is that again, we're all reconciled to each other. We're all part of one family. So let us serve you by cooking this meal.
Yeah.
And I think that's easily missed, but I think it's very key to how we do meals, is because we all line up and go, great, dinner's ready for us.
Yeah.
But however many people have slaved away for hours cooking these meals for us. Yeah. And I think that's really a lovely...
and it's something that crosses so many cultures.
Right.
Like again, to mention mission again, so crazy. This year we were away, and a Syrian couple who are refugees came and made us just a mountain of food.
Man.
And that's their way of loving us and serving us as we were hanging out with them. And like, you think about how many boundaries and cultures that crosses hospitality, loving. They didn't speak English, so it's not like we could communicate in that kind of way, but they've gone, we love Jesus and we're just stoked to be able to serve you in this way, which I think is just super, super cool.
Yeah. Whereas you would definitely miss that if you got some company to cater it every week.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that would be missed a lot. Last one that we thought like goes across all the areas, and I'd like the two people who have gone to Bible college to speak about this rather than me, is that we base our services or our gatherings or our meetings around the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. Do you guys want to articulate why we do that and what that kind of involves or what it looks like? Jai?
We do that because we're Anglican.
Yes, we are an Anglican church.
And so we do that. But also the premise of the prayer book is to give order and structure to our gatherings and to point us to the most important things that we do as we gather together, which is, hearing from God, speaking to God, and meditating on His Word. And so there are different forms within the prayer book when it means form, it means different structures that you can use, but all of them are there. And I could go into a long kind of explanation of why we have the prayer book and all that, and the importance of it, all those sorts of things, but I won't. But it's to guide us in our gatherings together, to draw us closer to God and His
and how we worship.
Yeah.
Brayden, and Jai said that can look different, but it's still the same, which is what we're kind of talking about in our gatherings. But for Friday night, for example, you're in charge of a Friday night gathering.
Yeah.
That looks a little bit different, for example, to our Saturday night gathering at Kirrawee, where it's reasonably formal. We'd have a confession, like when I lead the service on Saturday night, we have the confession. Someone always prays, someone always reads the Bible. We have a sermon, and then we do have other things, but they're the kind of the core of the prayer book service. But how would that look different on a Friday night, for example?
So I think the lessons we've learned over the last little bit is that, encouragingly, we've had a massive influx of younger crew that have never been to church.
And have a very non-Christian background.
Yeah, very non-Christian background, and also just have no expectations of what church should be or is.
I don't know what the Anglican Book of Common Prayer
well,
is.
like at least like not even that. Like I walked into church having never been to church before, but I had seen Ned Flanders on The Simpsons or something. Like there was some kind of cultural touchstone there.
Well, they go to church on The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was some kind of cultural touchstone there that I kind of, even though it was weird and foreign, I had some kind of framework. I think what we've been experiencing lately is they have zero framework. There's nothing in their lives or in the media they consume or that is close to what church would be. Other than maybe they think, I guess someone's getting up and talking, maybe it's like a classroom. That's their only kind of cultural touchstone for what's going on, which has actually been really lovely and helpful, because it means that as we get up and chat about on a Friday, we get up and say, hey, someone's going to come and read the Bible now. This is why we read the Bible. Someone's going to come up and pray. This is why we pray.
Right.
Hey, the service leader will normally get up and be like, hey, welcome. We're about to sing. This is why we sing. So that's been a really helpful and fun realization, is having that realization of like, oh, they're really not acting like how other people act in church. Oh, it's because they've got literally no framework for how to act in church. Yeah. And they don't really understand what's going on. And they don't understand, what makes it different from, what makes singing in church different from singing at the footy.
Or karaoke.
Yeah. Or at SingStar or whatever. They have no framework for that. So I think that's been a very fun realization, instead of it being a frustration. Once you realize that, you're like, wow, God's really put us in a really fun position where we get to show a number of younger crew what church can be and why we do it. And
not
so
not
Friday,
a problem, a gospel opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I was going to say, because you're taking what could be considered a ministry problem and saying, no, it's a gospel opportunity. We're still going to keep the prayer book service.
Yeah.
But because they don't have any kind of church background, we're going to explain why it's important that we do this every single week.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good bridge to kind of talking about what we're talking about with the other gathering is, if we're going to scale it back down to a Vesper, what does that look like? And Jai, I'll throw to you on this one. What does that look like, scaling it down, but still keeping on the Book of Common Prayer service?
So just to be clear, we don't get up with the Book of Common Prayer.
I keep saying that.
Oh, you don't?
They do on Friday night.
Friday night.
Morning song, evening song.
Sorry, it's the framework for how we kind of run the service, but it differs to our different contexts. We're being adaptable.
Yeah, so we have a run sheet, and it's very much mirrored off that. And so when we're talking invest, we're talking smaller. We're talking more low key. We're even talking a little bit more experimental in how we how we actually gather and the time and all those things. And so those three elements that we keep talking about are important, and those things will not happen. It makes sense. So we'll still be reading, we'll still be praying, we'll still be doing a sermon. The sermon might be shorter. The prayers might be not one person up the front doing it, might be a collective.
Or praying together.
Praying together. Yeah, it might be breaking in small groups. It might be just praying from wherever you're sitting. It might be outside doing church instead of inside. Picnic rugs or round tables or whatever it might be. But still doing, still keeping those things front and centre of our formal meeting.
And I think that might, like, even if you look at the Bible, in Acts, where they're probably facing some hostility as well, which we don't face too much hostility in terms of meeting.
No.
But they would be like meeting in caves, they were meeting in people's houses. Like there was ways you'd have to be really quite adaptable and flexible with what you're doing. I think that's what we're talking about is that, you know, as we said, our theology stays the same, our strategy stays the same, but that allows us for our practice to be really flexible because we've got all those key anchor points to hang off where we're trying to change things. He talked about being experimental though. What kind of rockets would you blow up if you're going to a Vesper service? And this is not just for this particular gathering, but what would that kind of look like if you were thinking this way?
Brayden can jump in too, I'm sure. But I think it'd be some of those preconceived ideas on what church needs to be. I think would be a rocket that we would blow up. So as we said earlier about trying to, with 15 odd people trying to do what you do with 100 people. Do you know? I know that's not one of the. It's more of a sacred cow that you might have to sacrifice than more of a rocket blowing up. But I think in terms of experimenting, it might be, going outside and sitting on the lawn and doing church more like a picnic. That might be a rocket that you launch and see how it goes, and if it blows up, it blows up. Again, as I say, you don't burn the bridges and you work out what worked and what didn't work and try something new. I know they've been trying to do more of a sort of almost like a cafe style outside around tables. Some of those things give a go.
Would you experiment with location?
I think location, that's the interesting one. I think there's something about being seen in a particular place often.
Consistent.
Yeah. As I said, like being in the school where we were hidden was difficult, and now that we're out in the open and people can see us, there's something about that will actually cause people to stop, or people will know that we're there. I do know that there are some churches that actually will go for a walk in different places, and that's how they'll meet.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, there might be the odd occasion, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, where we might decide to go on a walk, and the focus of that time might be praying for our community and the area that we're in. That could be a possibility.
Progressive breakfast as well.
Could be, yeah. Just someone following us around with a barbecue. The poor person's got to wheel it while the other person's...
maybe just tow it behind a car or something.
I'll stick it on a ute,
yeah. That's it. Just cooking while you're driving around.
Yeah.
That would be a bit of hard work. I think it's interesting talking about location, because we've kind of had those experiences being in schools, which we kind of think we need to move that. I remember a long time ago where we were at Guyman Anglican, part of the Sorrel youth community, and our youth venue, if you want to call it that, we call it the venue, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
The factory, the owner sold that, and we had to move out. And then we did this time where we said we were in the wilderness. That was changing location every week though, wasn't it? So that's kind of different way. And it's a different context again. It wasn't distinctly church, but it was, we were meeting together as Christians all the time on a Saturday night. But I suppose maybe that's why the friendship thing, coming back to the friendship thing, was really important, that we could keep moving around. Whereas I think your point with church, that if we want more people to come along to it, and I mean to some extent we always wanted people to come to Soli's as well when we were meeting, but the interesting thing would be, if you're doing a church, that probably needs to be consistently there for someone to, hopefully go, I might go check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess if you think about it, if like you were going to invite people over your house, but you moved every week, like it's like, where am I? What's my address again?
And even a cafe doesn't move, does it?
No.
You know that place stays there, so you know you can always go to it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Do you think that influences, Brayden, I might get your opinion on this first. Do you think how much do you think the location influences the leadership team and then consequently the rest of the congregation that's going to that gathering? Got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Like, so as you said before, I'm in charge of the Friday gathering, and it was the first gathering planted from Saturday night. Yep. And so, but it's also had a lot of ups and downs and changes over that time period.
A lot of rockets.
We've been Vesper and Beetle. We've kind of gone Vesper, Beetle along in terms of like strategies and things and frameworks and number as well. And so over that time period, I think I've really enjoyed the experimentation, but it was also about like Jai said, realizing where you're at and what you're able to pull off and do. And so we've been set up as a formal church. We've moved rooms. We've obviously always been at the Kirrawee gathering, but we've set up in a horseshoe in our main auditorium. We've moved to lounges. We had like heaps of moving across back and forth, trying to figure out what worked and what worked for the people that we had and what we could set up and what we could pack down, things like that. And that's depended on the leadership, because it's also probably changed leadership more than any other gathering, which has been really lovely and refreshing over the time period, and different ideas and different things happening. But I think when we found really successful and great is when we had a high buy-in from that leadership team and really put a core team together that was bigger than an individual or a couple of people. And that's been really just before COVID and since COVID. And we had a lot of fun in COVID. We experimented during that period. We were Lego. We were in a car. I'm trying to think of what crazy things that we did.
The construction
online.
night.
And I think that was like a blessing from COVID, is that it gave us opportunity to be really free and experimental. We obviously still were friends, and we still had the Book of Common Prayer as underpinning to everything we were doing. Obviously, we couldn't have digital meals, but maybe next lockdown.
Please not.
Send Uber Eats to everyone.
But yeah, like we had those underpinnings and got to build off that. And we found that the people who did stick around with us during that time period came out of COVID just super stoked and ready to go. And I think that's what's helped us kick on and kick off post that.
And Friday night has been growing consistently.
Yeah, and it was it really grew out of that, I think. So we had that time to really form and storm as a smaller leadership team, because we could only have so many people on site, and we had to and we could only interact so much. And so we really pulled the core team together, sorted it out, and then as we came out of COVID, it was a momentum shift thing, and I think that was really lovely. And I think it also, to go back to your original question, that shows the power of having a close-knit leadership community that had a goal and that were friends, and then did that during 2 different lockdowns and came out of it stronger.
I think actually it mirrors a lot with our ride gathering as well, because they basically began on Zoom. A couple of friends, Grace and Michelle, who did come to our church at one point in time, and then they were interested in planning a church, and they started as a they called it Bible chats, where they chatted every Wednesday night with whoever wanted to come on Zoom during lockdown, to talk about what the Bible was saying and what it meant, and relationship with Jesus and all that kind of thing. And now they've grown to we'd say a Beetle size, and they launched recently. And I'd love to get at some point we'll get Joey, our pastor at Ride, to come and talk about it more. But I think that's another clear example, is that they had a really strong core team who were friends together, and then were ready to go out and see what Jesus had for them to do. So another good example. This has been really fun, because I think we've had a lot of fun today coming up with these gospel opportunities and how we can and move things around. I just like, maybe to wrap up the episode, I'd like to ask both of you, like, what have you learned from doing this today? Whether it's on the podcast or doing it, what we were doing over lunch, really, wasn't it?
Learned that Cronulla was really far away.
That's not true.
Inside joke.
Yeah, that was an inside joke where one of our interns said that Cronulla is a long way away and it's literally a 20-minute drive.
And I had to just look at Joey and shake my head.
Yeah, Joey's like, yeah, right is a lot further than that where we are.
Yeah, I think what's I've pulled out of today and what's been very exciting is finding joy and opportunity in what we're doing, whether it's with a lot of people or a few people. I think it's interesting when you can pull the distinction that a successful or a healthy church is a big church, when I don't think you'd say that about your friendship group. You could have a successful and healthy friendship group that's just you and one other person. And ultimately, like, I'd say you can have a pretty successful friendship group with just you and God. But to go beyond that as a church expression, I think you can have a successful and healthy church of 15 people, and just looking how we can make that a sustainable and loving thing. And obviously we want to aim to grow because we've been called by Jesus to go and make disciples, and we want to do that obviously, but also just thinking through not just where you want to be, but where you're at and how you can be successful and healthy there. I think that's been a really cool thing to think about.
Joy?
Yeah, I think similar. The reminder of the freedom that we have in experimenting with our church, while keeping certain things, our core things, keeping them at the core, but there is room to move within that. I was even thinking, as Brayden was talking about the stuff that they've done here on a Friday night, I know when we were at the school at Woolaware, every 3 or 4 months we changed the orientation of the church because we were trying to find what was the best. So the toilets were behind the stage, and the entrance, it was all kind of weird, and we just kept changing. And that was, it kind of created sometimes people walk in and go, oh, which way are we going to be facing this way? Today.
Which way is it this time?
Yeah, just having that culture of experimenting. I think you can do that with friends. You can try stuff, and if it doesn't work, as friends, you just go, oh, that was fun, wasn't it? Or let's try something else.
Yeah, it's not a one and done kind of thing. No.
So I think that, experimenting with friends is fun. It's heaps of fun. And I think having that friendship and that culture to do that, and the freedom to experiment while keeping certain things front and centre has been really encouraging today to keep thinking through. Obviously we're not going to start doing weird and wacky things, but we'll keep the core things the core. But just knowing that they're, as I think you said earlier, Acts, they've met in different places and in different ways over time. The history of Sorrow Revival Church, we've met in different ways and in different places, and so we can do those things. I think, in terms of the size of churches, that actually can be really freeing, and the low-key nature of some of those things means that we can prevent burnout or devote more time to relationships and mission and discipleship.
No, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I think that's what I'm really encouraged by, is that because Brayden said earlier, we have the solidity of Jesus, the solid foundation, that it actually doesn't matter what we do, and that it allows us to fail. It allows us to experiment. It allows us to blow up rockets and still go, well, Jesus is still in charge.
Yep.
We're still partnering with him, so he'll show us the way. We'll probably make some mistakes. We're sinful. We probably won't do exactly what he wants us to do, but one way or the other, he's still allowing us to experiment with these ways to try and build his kingdom. And I think that's what's been really encouraging, I think, as a staff team, but also just individually and being part of this church, that we can actually do that.
It kind of comes full circle back to the Jesus Revolution movie.
It really does.
Like he took a chance, he experimented, could have blown up in his face. Yep. It didn't. God was very gracious, and church grew.
Even looked like it was going to blow up in his face.
A couple of times by the sounds of it.
That's right.
And that's a huge risk too, like bringing in barefooted people to erect the carpet or putting a tent up because the church is too big, you know, all those things. So yeah, those experiments can pay off sometimes too.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the one and done thing of like the Friday night is a perfect example of that. It's shifted between Vesper and Beetle 4, 5, maybe 6 times, and that's okay to do that because we have the solidity to fall back on. It's we often think that like if we do it once, then that's the only way we can do it. We have to get it right. We have to get it perfect. But the thing is that we're not perfect. So why don't we just remember that Jesus is taking care of everything for us on the cross. We're reconciled to each other as friends. We can take those risks and blow up a few rockets, not do something wild and out there and crazy.
We're talking about hurting people too, by the way. We're talking about blowing up rockets.
Yeah, I know, but exactly. But it's, again, just try some stuff.
Yep.
See how it goes. And I think we learn a lot of that through youth ministry. And that's why it's exciting that our church we learned all those lessons in youth ministry, which helped us to go, we can do this in church as well, and still make mistakes and still not get things right and still partner with Jesus to hopefully grow his church. So it's been really fun talking about these guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jai. Thank you, Brayden. Thank you for doing this on a whim, because we thought this was a kind of cool idea to talk about. I think this is where we want to head with the Shock Absorber, is to throw out ideas and actually work things out on camera or on tape.
Oh yeah, straight to tape.
On vinyl.
Yeah, on vinyl.
Reel to reel.
Yeah, exactly. But also thanks to everyone listening and or watching. And if you do have any other questions, or you want to challenge us on what we're talking about today, or you want to chat to us about the process, or whatever you have any questions about what we're talking about, email me at joel@shockabsorber.com.au and we can talk about it on the podcast, or you can come and meet us if you want to. But it's been fantastic again. As always, do check out the Jesus Revolution movie if you haven't. Out in cinemas now. Do
yourself a favour.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for the trailer if you haven't seen it. But it was a lot of fun to see that too. So in the spirit of the Jesus movement, we're going to finish with a one way.